things have changed in recent years. Applying early matters much less than it used to. You could take the November LSAT and be at virtually no disadvantage for this cycle, meaning you take it in November, November 25th, you get your score back 3 weeks later, you apply by the end of the calendar year. There's no difference really between October and November. And if you got even 1 point more in November, it would be well worth taking in November instead. If you take January and then apply in next year, if you apply in 2020 to start law school in fall 2020, then you are at a slight disadvantage when it comes to things like financial aid. But I do at the same time hear conflicting things from admission officers where every school is different, every year is different, what they're looking to fill their class with is different. And so the bottom line is that applying later doesn't really matter that much anymore. The biggest disadvantage would be financial aid if you are applying to start law school in the same year. If financial aid were not a huge deal, you could take it in January and apply to start that fall, totally fine. But if you're looking to take it in the spring, like there is no February LSAT, by the way, this year. So if you're taking in March or April or June, then at that point, I would say definitely wait another year to start law school just because your odds will be better, the financially will be more. And 1 year in the grand scheme of your career really isn't that big a difference.
Okay. Thanks for calming me down from my panic attack.
Yeah, of course. Sure. Priscilla, you had something to say?
Yeah. Last Monday when we did the session with the UCLA admissions, the Dean of Admissions, Jocelyn, did you attend that one? That was a good one. A lot of the students did ask questions similar to that about the financial aid. And like Steve mentioned, he hears a lot of conflicting information because from what he said, because a lot of students were saying, were asking something similar, like, does he recommend students just applying very early admissions? And he was saying sometimes someone who applied very early with maybe a score of maybe somewhere in a median, and then someone else who came in a little later, maybe a month later or so, but had a higher score, there isn't that much disadvantage if you're coming in with a higher score. They are willing to work with you and especially want you more than someone else who has a lower score. So you also got to keep that in mind too. So like Steve was mentioning, I think what he was trying to say is if you have to retake it so that you can get a higher score and a better chance at it, because while early admission can give you financial aid, so does a higher score. And sometimes the closer you get to the top, even every 1 or 2 point increase makes a huge difference. And it puts you at a place where you can qualify for certain scholarships too that are open all throughout the year. For his school specifically, he did mention that there are scholarships that are available. And I did go on the school website and I did look where it's like, in general, there are scholarships for like, women. For me, women of color, I was looking into that for, like different programs, like the state you come from and what type of program you want to do, all of that stuff. They're like scholarships set aside that has nothing to do with when you apply, but more so with your scores. So look into that too. So when you're worried about just the financial aid aspect of it, just think about, if I get a high score, will this really matter? According to what he said, not really, because you are kind of here and then the other people who applied earlier but with lower scores are here, and you have a higher chance of getting more funds than them because of your score. So just put that in mind that, okay, I got a really good score, so I'm at a really great advantage over others who do not have great scores but they applied early.
Well said, Priscilla. That's a great summary. Thank you for that.
I was just curious how much law school research or is there anything you have done? Because I'm kind of lost here. I am, start to try to do some law school research, but like when should we start? Or I'm curious to see, what's your process like right now or where you're at.
Shakira, I'll let you go first since I've been talking for most of the time.
Ever since I was an undergraduate, undergraduate at Rutgers Newark. They have a law school there, so I always knew in my heart I wanted to go there. I actually took a couple law courses, so like my goal is to get there, but also just looking, I know I want to stay in the East Coast, but Miami or Cali, I would definitely be out. So like just thinking like personally what I would want. So like I know number one in my heart is Rutgers Newark, but then just like having like a little bit of a dream. So like thinking where else are my possibilities? Because right now I have a 3.6 GPA, focusing on my LSAT score. That's like where I want to go next. I know I have experience as a teacher. So whichever school I go to, I want them to appreciate like my background, like being a Latina woman, like knowing I believe there's like less than 5 to 3% of Latina women in the as just being lawyers. So appreciate that. And then just also having a strong support for like first generation college students, period. Because like I'm the first in my family ever to go to college, and now I'm going to be the first in my family ever to go to law school. So like thinking about that, just extra type of support, which I know I'm going to need, especially if I choose a school not close from home, to have that. And like I know Rutgers hits all these tick marks because like I've been there for so long and I know what they have, but I want to now expand my research because like my non-negotiables are like, do you guys support like people of color? Like one, like do you guys actually have programs that are enlisted right now in motion to have that? Thinking about class sizes, don't want class sizes to be too large. And just thinking about scholarship money. So that's another thing, like looking at their history, like nobody wants to graduate school from with tons of debt, right? So like that's going to be like another factor because like again, Rutgers Newark, like they don't have a high tuition as compared to other law schools, which I've seen the tuition, which is like crazy. So like just considering all those, like those would be my like 3 non-negotiables. Like don't want to get too much in debt. Is there like a minority assistance program, and then like how well do they support their students in like class sizes?
That is awesome, Shakira, and totally on point. So I've actually just started putting something together for myself as far as doing research. I've incorporated interviews into my research. So UK is actually one of the schools that I was looking at. And you know, this interview was very like insightful and actually engaging because I had not engaged with admissions. And I think, you know, especially after their admissions cycle ends, I think is totally fair game to reach out to schools and um, start to develop a relationship. One of the things I've been doing is, you know, I'll look at a school, I'll start looking at their stats. I'll start looking at the programs that they offer. So I'm really interested in employment law. And so I'm looking at, you know, schools that have really good programs, but also location is like really important for me. So I guess I would start with, I guess to kind of start answering your question, exactly, you know, if you have a specific interest, I would start with that. If you know that location is super important, I would start with that as well. For example, even though I attended the interview with I think it was DeMarcado with UC Davis. Excellent interview, guys. Check that one out too. I'm not necessarily interested in going to California, and I wasn't sure about that until I went to the interview. And I kind of learned more about the school. Now, I'm not saying that the school isn't excellent, it's great, but I don't know that going to California as far as location would be necessarily good for me. Since I'm more of a East Coast, Southern person. I'm originally from Georgia, so I'm interested in the South and interested in the East. So definitely looking at location and the program, but then also going back to that question of diversity, right? And diversity and inclusion, that is not a non-negotiable for me. So now I actually have the tools now to start asking the questions about that because I didn't really know where to start or how to figure that out because, you know, they're the stats, but what do the stats mean? You know, and especially like when you're engaging with an admissions person, like, you know, of course, everyone's wanting to put their best foot forward and really represent the school that they're working for. So you have to know how to weed things out. So I think doing that, and then also looking at the costs as well and looking at full ride scholarships, I've started trying to figure out what schools offer full rides. Is that even like possible? I think that that financial aspect, I think, is super important to answer your question.
Yeah, that's so great to hear both of your perspectives on this, because I myself just about to, start doing more in-depth law school research. I have done some, have a spreadsheet, but I want to take this time to just go in depth, right? And I think that's great it's also to email admissions, right? For, like you mentioned, Jocelyn, your diversity, right, is a non-negotiable for you. I think that could be something that you could email to admissions and ask them directly and start building those like relationships. Yeah. I mean, I have to refine my personal statement and working on the diversity statement, all that aspect, and of course working on the LSAT. Um, but yeah, oh, okay.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So in terms of doing the research, do you kind of have like an idea of I guess like a trajectory or a timeline where you give yourself like goals of, okay, by this time I want to have this completed, by this time I want to have this completed. How do you, I mean, like what's your process for that, if any? I was just curious. And in terms of, I guess, reaching out to schools, because that's something that I think a lot of folks have, I don't want to say trouble with, but they're nervous. And one of the great things about LSAT Unplugged, gotta, put that in there, is that, Steve helps, he becomes the bridge, so to speak, where, I wanted to reach out to UK Law, but, maybe I was nervous or something of that nature. And so with me, working with Steve, he's allowed or he's enabled me to be able to do that and push, beyond those boundaries. So I was just curious, have you met with or reached out to folks already, or you're still trying to kind of like, I guess, figure that out?
Yeah, so right now I don't have a set timeline in terms of like researching law schools, but I definitely want to spend it's May, right? So I definitely want to have probably all my research done by, let's say, September. Because I want to put in my applications early, so like everything else around it by, I would say, either after Thanksgiving, before Christmas, right? To send in it depending on the school, because I do not want to apply early admission. So I guess as soon as that early admission deadline, I'll probably send in my applications when it's all done. So yeah, so just to answer your question, just I think right around September, give myself, plenty of time to do all the research, reach out to admissions. If there's any questions, that I may have or come to mind later on. Last year, I have reached out to Columbia because I really want to go to New York. Um, yeah, and I'm like you, I really want to stay in the East Coast, not really West Coast girl. So I still want to stay around here. I love New York. I want to live in New York for a few years. So I've reached out to Columbia, and they were so very helpful, and they replied super fast. And so um, I'm planning to, reach out to them again once I've done my research, of course, if I have any questions coming up, to just kind of keep those relationships, and other schools in New York. I was looking also at Fordham, and I asked Steve if he can, I don't know, be a bridge to us or anything, but yeah, so just some of the schools. Yeah, does that like answer your question?
Definitely. I was just curious because like this is a question or that I had with like another TA and sort of trying to figure out how to plan that, right? And also, you know, making sure to talk to schools and during like the right time. The dean of Georgetown talked about how at that particular moment when I was asked during the interview, that time frame, which I think that was a couple of weeks ago, wasn't necessarily a good time because they were still trying to get decisions out and different things of that nature. And so I thought that was really like interesting that he was able to, you know, helpfully nicely say, hey, like right now this is not a good time to like, you know, reach out to us or whatever. But he did also say that, hey, you know, we do have student ambassadors for you guys to talk to as well and reach out to ask questions. Shakira, I'm going to bring you kind of into this conversation. So how are you structuring, I guess, your prep for, you know, reaching out to these law schools, if any, and do you have any advice to, I guess, share with the rest of us as to exactly how you're navigating through it?
I have a list of law schools that I gotta find in one journal, but I definitely have to like fine tune them. So like same Sochita, like by the end of this week, I would want to have, let's say, 8 to 10 law schools that I'm interested in on paper. And then after that, just sending emails. So like having like a general email template, I know it'll reduce my stress of like, hey, my name's Shakira. This is what I have to provide. These are the certain things that I'm interested in your law school. Can you provide a little more clarification on clinics or opportunities? What does your law review look like? So like presenting myself in a positive manner and then just having specific questions to the school based on like whatever like they provide in general. So like my goal, end of the week, 10 schools, where do I want to go? And then just having a general template, and then I'll build up the courage to send it to the schools.
Right. So like that goes back to really quickly what Director Nicholson said was like to not necessarily be afraid and don't count yourself out. So just want to send some supportive vibes your way. I know you're going to be totally fine when you said those emails. Go ahead, Shachita.
Yeah, that's such a great goal, Shakira. I believe in you. You can do it. You've got this. I was just going to add to the point that Jocelyn made earlier. It was such a great point that you brought up in terms of like how early is early to reach out to those admissions, because they may not have all the answers for you right now. And which I was going to say that I guess for me, maybe generally, you know, I would say perhaps like a good time after this cycle started, which probably right around August, I think they would know maybe not all, maybe not everything, right? But like in terms of like their plans for like the next cycle or how this cycle is going, right? You know, and how this cycles, they're using this cycle to prep for the next one in terms of like COVID and their new guidelines, you know, and I know that's different for different law schools because of different area of the country. So that I was just thinking that that's such a great point, because I would probably reach out to them around maybe very early September, you know, just to see and if, you know, have any questions from like now to, you know, September, just doing like my own research, right? And have as much on paper, as much as valuable information in terms of preparing the application, because I don't want to be like a couple months before, say, Thanksgiving, and then just kind of all over the place, don't really know anything, you know, so just to kind of be prepared for that, because the holidays, you know how that goes with everything, and study for the LSAT, you know, and taking it. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think especially, you know, keeping in mind with this, you know, everything is obviously flexible. It's your schedule. It's um tailored to you, right? And and this is something that I really hope to do, is I really hope to talk to especially student ambassadors, because I do feel as though, and this is something that Steve and a lot of the TAs have been talking about, is the fact that, like, of course, there are some questions that, you know, you're not I mean, you don't necessarily need to ask an admissions officer because, you know, they're admissions and they are not gonna, it can, you know, depending on if they have attended law school, like for example, this director, from what I understand, she is not an attorney, which, so I thought that was very interesting, that she decided to go this route with the admissions, but it isn't an attorney. But for students that are, for those that, you know, admissions folks that have had that experience, I think, you know, they're able to impart some knowledge because of course, you know, they've been through the process. But there are some nitty gritty questions that I think, you know, when talking to like admission, or not admissions, but students ambassadors, that I think there are certain answers that you're going to get that you wouldn't necessarily get from the admissions officer just because they're completely different, just different fields. One thing that Director Nicholson actually mentioned was the fact that students aren't necessarily going to their, I guess, their reach out or their, I can't remember exactly what the formal name for them, but, you know, law schools, they have all these forums for students so that they can ask questions and whatnot online and in person. But she stated that, you know, people aren't really doing those online forums. And I was just curious, what were your guys' thoughts on that? As we are, you know, definitely wanting to reach out to schools and whatnot. I think that was a very interesting point that she made, that a lot of students aren't utilizing that resource. Do you think it's because people don't really know where they are, or you know, aren't attuned, or is it a promotion thing, or is it just because people really aren't wanting to be doing these things on Zoom or other media platforms?
I think one is just being aware. So like as we said, like I know I haven't done most of my research, so I can't attend something I'm not aware of. And then yeah, just like scheduling the time, because it's like right now, like it's May. I know a lot of us are aiming for June, August LSAT. So like that's our number one priority. I know like when I review things, I'm like, oh, I would love to attend, but like right now I need to get like reading comp tight. So that's another issue. But in promotion, in going to these events, I actually went to one which was like the Hispanic Association, the Hispanic Lawyers Association of Illinois, and they had a forum, I believe, right on LSAC. And I like randomly registered, went to the thing. It was an all-day Saturday, and there was an actual mock class with an actual professor of law. So I was really nervous. But I had my background of like the law school because I usually studied there when I was an undergrad. And he immediately recognized it. He's like, oh, that's Rutgers, right? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, how do you know? So I had a great connection with him based off that. And I only read the case because it was about a Pepsi case. And I read the case like 5 minutes before class. I'm like, I hope he doesn't call on me. And he's calling on people with cameras off and they're not responding. And I just like was like, hey, professor, like, you know, I'll volunteer myself if you really need someone. And just to have that experience of him like back to back questioning, like he was with me, like no lie, for 30 minutes, like back to back questioning. Okay, but what was the judge's opinion on this case and how did it play out? So just to have that experience, he solidified for me at the end. He's like, yeah, you need to go to law school. It's just, I've never seen someone so confident and just like applying it, and like the fact that you volunteered yourself, like I will remember you. So that made me a great connection there. And then also like these law schools have things to offer, right? So like knowing me as a woman of color, like the barriers that I have to face in applying for the LSAT, like of course, like I'm a teacher, thankfully I'm getting like a salary, but of course it's like paying for all this stuff out of pocket, even for this course, it is a lot that I have to budget and consider. So just relaying that importance to them, like, hey, like I'm working full time, I'm trying to invest in myself. It's like, and they were like, oh yeah, like we'll have raffles, because like, so when you attend these events, they might send you like a sticker or like whatever it is. But like I actually won the raffle for like an LSAT course that's going to be in person from June to August. So it just gives me another at bat, like after I take June, just another at bat with August. So like I called the guy and it was like $1,650. And he was like, yeah, here's the school's credit card. And I was like, what? So I won that. So like going to that forum, I would not I would have not been able to receive that. And then he also sent me the book that I've been reading today, the LSAT trainer. He sent me that book as too. So like these schools have a lot to offer. And if you do reach out, it's just like, again, like another point of contact. And I didn't realize this, but now this is just going to motivate me to go to other ones that I'm interested in, because they do have raffles. So even if it's not a full LSAT course, they'll give you something else because like, oh, you want to come to my school. These are the things that you need to go to my school. Let me offer it to you. So that's in their budget. Don't forget that. Because like as a teacher, I know about the budget. There's certain things in the budget that they have to promote you wanting to go to the school. It's just like business overall. So like if you do attend those forums, just like they'll be like, oh, okay, they'll keep an extra eye on you basically.
Wow. That is incredible, Shakira. We need to have a side chat. Okay. We need to have a side chat. That also I guess speaks to, you know, you just going out there and doing it. It's easy and utilizing the resources available to you. So one of the scholarships that I found out about was the NAACP's Legal Defense Fund. It's a 4-year or full ride scholarship. And what that means is they're not only paying for, you know, your tuition and your books, but they're also paying for housing. They're also paying for electronic devices if you need upgrades or something's broken or whatever. And they're also helping folks with getting externships and internships and all of those things. But it has a 13-year commitment, I think, in the South, right? The caveat. And so I would not have known that had I not gone to one of the LSAC sessions, which I think, like you said, Shakira, it's you have to utilize those, and it's a way of being able to reach out to schools and you know, get free things, perhaps.
How are y'all researching the schools that you're applying to? Has that been a process that you're doing now, just starting? What does that look like for y'all?
That's a great question. Because I literally just started doing that like this week, and I'm literally like pulling up my sheet right now. So I wasn't sure, Ayaka, if it was you or Alyssa that said the 25 minutes, like the Pomodoro method with doing this. I found like that was actually like really helpful. But
Yes.
I did that, and like the things that I wrote down when I was looking at the websites were like location, type of programs they have, courses, faculty, different organizations on campus, if they have journals, what kind of journals they do, clinics, and then I also have like a separate thing on like tuition, like what percentage of people get scholarships, like stuff like that. So it's thorough, but I feel like there's still more I could add to it. That was just kind of what I thought was a good starting point.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And are you searching by program, or are you searching like by school, like ranking, or what's the method there?
Good question. The way that I would answer this is in like the way that a lawyer would answer this is it kind of depends. I think for me, I'm probably going to go into like public interest law. So I'm looking at programs that are very focused on like that kind of law. But at the same time, I'm looking for, for me, I'm prioritizing location too. Like I want to be at a good location for like future job opportunities. So location's important for me. What else am I looking at? Price obviously is going to be a big one because I mean, it's kind of hard not to care about price these days. I mean, some people really, for me, this isn't the thing, but I know a lot of people care about like student to teacher ratios because some people like smaller classes and like that more intimate feel.
Yeah.
For me, that's not as big of a deal, but I totally understand that. So that's another thing people might consider. But I was actually meaning to talk to Steve about this, about like what are because he says how like rankings aren't everything, but it's like, what do you then when you're like trying to figure out which school is for you, what are the things you should be looking for? I think I saw Ariel put like bar passage rate, which is a good thing to look at. I agree. But there's so much you should be looking for, and I don't know, it's hard to know.
Have you encountered, I know there's Georgetown that asks for a video submission for applications. Have you guys encountered those like weird, not weird, but kind of out there application submissions? And what do you guys think about them?
I did the video for Georgetown 2 years ago. I didn't get in, so maybe they didn't like it. But yeah, I have like encountered those. I think some of the ones, the essay questions are more creative too. Like I'm not a very creative writer, so it takes like more energy. But I would say, yeah, the Georgetown's probably like the most creative one. I wish I had like a better idea. I can't even remember what my video was about. I could try to find it probably on YouTube, but it was like about something I was a part of. I went to UCLA, like just like some organizations I was a part of, but I think I could have been more creative after doing some YouTube research after I turned it in.
Yeah, those, I was looking at it and I was like, it's hard because it's like 1 minute or something like that, right? Or it's a pretty extensive like creative writing part. So I was like, ooh, that's difficult.